This is Advanced Math Notes for 3.8, Unit 3, Lesson 8. Operations with trig functions and true-false analysis. Okay, I know it's a long title. Operations with trig functions and true-false analysis. This is probably the hardest lesson of all the ones we've had so far. You want to make sure that you're paying attention, it's making sense. You might also, if you are using the unit circle, you want to have it out. If you use the hand trick, you can continue using the hand trick. If you have it memorized and that's what you're working with. So if you need to take out your unit circle, you can hit pause really quick and take it out. And when I did these the other day, I did forget to fill those in. So hopefully you filled them in on your own. If not, pi over 2, fill it in now. Pi over 2, and this is 3 pi over 2. Okay. Putting the unit circle aside, again, you can just leave it out if you're going to use it. We're going to start with evaluate. Number 1, cosine squared of pi over 6 versus it written something like this, sine of 30 degrees squared. Looking at where the squared is, I'm sure you learned this last year, does make a difference. When it's written like this, cosine squared of pi over 6, this is asking you to find cosine of pi over 6 and then square it. That's what it's asking you to find. Where this one, because of where this, there's no parentheses, and it's written out here on the 30, this is asking you to square the 30 first. 30 times 30 is 900, so you're finding sine of 900 degrees. So recognize the difference. Okay, cosine of pi over 6, you either have it memorized, unit circle, or the hand trick. 30 degrees for pi over 6. So when you put this, think of this one as the comma. Cosine is here, the top piece, so that's root 3 over 2. Root 3 over 2 squared. Root 3 squared is 3, 2 squared is 4, 3/4 is your final answer. Okay, sine of 900. I'm just going to figure out where in the heck 900 is. I know one time around is 360. 360 plus 360 is 720, and 900 is bigger than that, so I'm going to go around again. And then how much further do we go? Subtract. Okay, so right now I'm at 720 because 360 and 360 again is 720. How much bigger is 900 than 720? 180. So that means I have 180 more degrees to go, which is right here. So this is where I end up. So that was 360, 720, plus 180 makes the 900. So that ordered pair is -1, 0. Sine is the y value, so 0 is my answer. All right, number 3. All of these will be on the quiz as well as the test. 4 times tangent of -3 pi over 4. Okay, 4 times whatever this value is. I like pi over 4 or reference angle with a 45 because it's 1 over root 2 for sine and cosine and 1 for tangent. So I know it's going to be 1. You do have to figure out where -3 pi over 4 is. This is -1/4, -2/4, -3 pi over 4 is in the third quadrant, because this would be 4 pi over 4 to make the -1 pi. Okay, so it is here. And just take a look really quick at your unit circle. That's this one right here. Looks like I didn't write that down either. Oh, excuse me. So right here, when you do -1 divided by -1, it does come out to be +1. And I'm just going to fill these in really quick. This is pi over 4. If this is 4 over 4, then this is 3 pi over 4. 4 over 4, this would be 5 pi over 4. This is 8 over 4, so subtracting 1 would be 7 pi over 4. Okay, putting this aside. So it comes out to be +1 in the end, and 4 times 1 is 4. Again, you'll be going faster when you're doing these on your own. Number 4. This one, by the way, is on the test, and kids mess it up every year, so you want to make sure you are paying attention. Sine of 3 pi over 2 plus tangent of pi over 7 times cotangent of pi over 7. Okay. Quite a few things going on here. Order of operation tells me to multiply these first before I add. So I know I have to multiply. There's no parentheses here, but order of operation tells me to work this out first. And unfortunately, pi over 7 is not on our unit circle. We don't have a reference angle for it. We could change it and calculate it, change it 2 degrees, but we can't use our scientific calculators to calculate tangent of that degree. You can use baby calculators on the test, but you will not be allowed to use scientific calculators for that reason. We can't plug those in. All right, so let's at least do this first. Sine of 3 pi over 2, that is down at the 270. Sine is the y value, so it is -1. That was too fast. You can hit pause, look at your unit circle, and figure it out. Plus, what's going on here? I don't know what tangent of pi over 7 is, nor do I know what cotangent of pi over 7 is. But I know they are reciprocals of each other, which means like 2 times 1/2, 7 over 2 times 2 over 7. Whenever I multiply reciprocals, it will always come out to be 1. Again, because they're reciprocals of each other, tangent and cotangent, it would work if this was sine and cosecant, or cosine and secant. As long as these two functions are reciprocals of each other, and these two values are exactly the same, it's always going to multiply to 1. And in this case, -1 plus 1 is 0. 0 is not always going to be your final answer, but this little piece in the blue bubble will always come out to be 1 when they are reciprocals of each other. Okay. And it doesn't matter which quadrant you're in, because reciprocals, when you multiply, always come out to be +1. Positive times a positive is positive, and negative times a negative is still positive. Okay, number 5. Cosecant squared of 30 degrees minus cotangent squared of 30 degrees. Okay, this one's the 30 degrees. This is my comma. This is cosine. This is sine. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, so that is the 1/2. Reciprocal of 1/2 is 2. And then I'm going to squared. Take away. Cotangent's the reciprocal of tangent, so if tangent's y over x, cotangent is x over y. Same finger down. So it's going to be x, sorry, x over y, which is √3 over 1. And I'm just going to write that as √3. And it is squared. 2 times 2 is 4. Take away √3 times √3 is 3. And 4 take away 3 is 1. Okay, number 6. True or false. And the next few are going to be true or false. All right, so cosine of 45 degrees equals cosine of negative 45 degrees. Now these first two are going to be ones where we can actually calculate them, but we're going to eventually get to some where we cannot and learn how to work with it. Okay, cosine of 45 is in quadrant 1, so it's positive. Again, 45 is nice because that's 1 over root 2, or root 2 over 2, depending on how you write it. And it's positive because it's in quadrant 1. Cosine of 45, my reference angles are negative 45. My reference angle is still 45, so it's still going to be 1 over root 2. I just have to figure out if it's positive or negative. This is positive 45. This is negative 45, which is in quadrant 4. All students take calculus. Is cosine positive in quadrant 4? Yes, yes it is. So they both come out to be positive. You don't have to put those plus signs there. They both come out to be positive, which means they are equal to each other, so it is true. Why? Because cosine of 45, that's quadrant 1, is equivalent to cosine of negative 45 in quadrant 4 because cosine is still positive. You can look at your unit circle. Here's negative 45 right here, and cosine is 1 over root 2. Here it is in the positive, it's 1 over root 2. They come out to be the same. Okay, number 7. Tan of 7 pi over 4 equals cotan of negative 3 pi over 4. Okay, we're dealing with two different trig functions here. We're dealing with tangent and cotangent. And typically those are not the same, but because we're dealing with the 45 reference angle, tangent of 45 is always 1, and cotangent of 1, the reciprocal of 1, is still 1. What we have to figure out is whether it's positive 1 or negative 1. So let's figure out our quadrants. What quadrant is 7 pi over 4 in? That is quadrant 3, because this is 8 over 4, so 7 over 4 is right there. So all students take calculus. Tangent is negative, so that's negative 1. If that went too fast, you can pull out your unit circle and take a look. Okay, cotangent, negative 3 pi over 4. Again, I think we did that one earlier. We did that right here, negative 3 pi over 4. This is negative 4 over 4. So this is negative 3 pi over 4, which is in quadrant 1, 2, 3. All students take calculus. Tangent's positive in quadrant 3, which means its reciprocal is positive. So this is going to come out to be positive 1. Again, tangent and cotangent of reference angle of 45 degrees is always going to be 1 or negative 1. 1 over negative 1 is negative 1. Negative 1 over negative 1 is positive 1. Negative 1 over 1 is negative 1, and 1 over 1 is positive 1. If you have root 2 over 2, then you have root 2 divided by root 2. It's still 1. Okay, these are not equal, therefore it is false. Okay, I'm going to do number 8 on the back, only because it's going to take me a little more space than what I have right there. Okay. Number 8. Tan of 7 pi over 4 equals cotangent of, nope, I'm sorry, is that the one I just did? It is, I apologize. Number 8 is sine of 178 Alright, sorry, I had to grab the white out so I can fix that. Okay. Sine of 178 degrees equals negative sine of 358 degrees. Okay, the most common thing for kids to do on this problem is say, oh, it's false, because, well, they're both signed, but that one's positive, that one's negative, and that's 178 and that's 358. There's no way those are going to equal. They're two different angles. But remember, here, these were two different angles. 7 pi over 4 and negative 3 pi over 4 were two different angles. This one was in quadrant 4 and this one was in quadrant 3, but yet they came out to be the same. So you want, I'm sorry, this one did not come out to be the same, sorry. This one here came out to be the same. This one was positive 45, this one was negative 45, and yet they came out to be the same. This one was in quadrant 1, this one was in quadrant 4, yet the solutions were the same. All right, so don't automatically assume it's false. You do have to go through and figure out what your reference angles are, even when it's not one of our standard angles. Okay, this is 180, this is 90, 270, 360, and I'm using degrees because these are written in degrees. 170 is in quadrant 2, and what is your reference angle? I'm going to draw it a little not to scale because I need to be able to put my reference angle in there. Okay, how far is 178 from the 180? 2 degrees. So 2 is my reference angle. All right, 358 is in quadrant 4, and how far is that one from? So this one is 358, it goes all the way around. But how far is it from the 360? 2 degrees. So do they have the same reference angle? Yes. If they have the same reference angle, there is a chance it may be true. It still could be false because one might be positive and one might be negative, but we still have to check. Okay, so let's figure it out. All students take calculus. For the sign of 178, I don't know what the answer is going to come out to be, but I know it's going to be positive. Okay, positive something. We can't use our scientific calculator, so we cannot plug it in. Next one, sine of 358 is over here. I'm going to put opposite of whatever I get. In this quadrant, only cosine is positive, so that means, covering the negative, sine of 358 is going to come out to be a negative value. Do you see that? All students take calculus. I don't know what sine of 358 is, but because it's in quadrant 4, I know it's going to come out to be a negative value. And if I have a negative times a negative, that's going to come out to be positive. Two positive values that are exactly the same because they have the same reference angle is going to be the same, therefore it is true. Okay, so if you have questions on this, I will clarify in class, but keep in mind if one was positive and this one was negative, the answer would be false. Okay, so what do you do with these? You check first if they have the same reference angle, which they do, 2 degrees. You check whether they're both positive or both negative. In this case, they both came out to be positive, therefore it is true. Okay. Number 9, another one on the test. Well, all of these are on the test, but these are ones that I'm pointing out are ones that kids struggle with. All right, square root of sine of 150 degrees plus cosine of negative 60 degrees all over 8 secant of 60 degrees. This is also on the quiz. Okay, so let's go ahead and work it out. I'm going to work over here to the right. 150 is in quadrant 2, and it's 30 degrees as the reference angle because it's 30 degrees from 180. So here's my 30. Sine is the y value, so it's 1 over 2. Plus cosine of negative 60. 60 is my reference angle, so this finger is down. Cosine is the x value, so that is 1/2. Now, positive or negative? Negative 60 is quadrant 4. Do you see that? Negative 60 is quadrant 4. And cosine is positive in quadrant 4, so it's positive 1/2. Okay, 8 times secant of 60. Secant's the reciprocal of cosine. Here's my 60 degrees down. This is my comma. Cosine is 1/2. The reciprocal of 1/2 is 2. Again, if you don't like that, use your unit circle or you have your facts memorized. 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1. Over 8 times 2 is 16. And the square root of 1/16 is 1/4. If that was too fast, you can hit rewind and play it again and make sure it makes sense. Number 10, sine of pi over 2 times secant of 2 pi all over 2 times cosine squared of pi over 3. All right. Pi over 2 is a quadrantal, and sine of pi over 2 is 1. You can look it up. Secant of 2 pi is another quadrantal. It's at your 360, and secant is the reciprocal of cosine. Cosine of 2 pi is also 1, and the reciprocal of 1 is still 1. I can show you that one. That one's here. Here's 2 pi. Secant's the reciprocal of cosine. Well, cosine of 2 pi is 1, and the reciprocal of 1 over 1 is still 1. Okay, and then 2 times, this is a reference angle of 60 degrees. Pi over 3 is 60 degrees. And cosine, is the 1/2. 1/2 squared, which equals 1 over 2 times 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. Does everyone see that? So I'm going to move it over here. Equals 1 over 2 times 1/4 is 1/2. Right? When you cross reduce, or 2 over 4 reduces to 1/2, which equals 1 times the reciprocal, which gives us a final answer of 2. 1 times 2 over 1 is 2. All right, number 11. 6 cosine squared 210 over cosecant of negative 210. If you'd like, you can hit pause, work it out, and then hit play and see if we end up with the same answer. All right, 210 has a reference angle of 30. You can double check that if you are not sure. It's 30 degrees past the 180 line. So cosine of 30, and it is the x value. So we have root 3 over 2. Now technically, because I'm squaring, I don't have to worry about whether it's positive or negative, but I still want to, out of habit, check it, only because when it's not squared and you forget to check positive or negative, it's going to mess you up if you're not checking. Okay, we just said that this was 30 degrees in quadrant 3, right, because this is 180. All students take calculus. It's cosine, and cosine is negative. Again, it didn't matter because I'm going to square it, but I'm just showing you want to keep track of those because sometimes it will mess you up if you are not paying attention. Okay, cosecant of negative 210. So this is another 30 degree reference angle. Where is negative 210? If this is negative 180 degrees, the negative 210 is in this quadrant here. Do you see that? And it still has a reference angle of 30. Cosecant's the reciprocal of sine. Excuse me. So it's 1/2 is sine because that's this finger here, and reciprocal of 1/2 is 2. And all students take calculus. Sine is positive in quadrant 2, so if sine is positive, the reciprocal of sine is still positive. Okay, reciprocal of positive 1/2 is positive 2. 6 times 3/4 over 2. And the 3/4 is negative root 3 times negative root 3 is 3. 2 times 2 is 4. 6 times 3/4, you do your reducing, put that over 1, multiply and reduce, or cross reduce. All in all, it comes out to be 9 over 2. That 2 is still 2 in the denominator. I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, and the reciprocal of 2 is 1/2, which gives me the square root of 9/4, and the square root of 9/4 is 3/2. Again, if that was too fast, you can hit rewind, play it again. Also, make sure you're making notes of questions to ask me in class. And that is it for this lesson.